My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined here by Jorge Gero, the current Technical Director at Caroline Springs George Cross. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Sasha. How are you?
Fantastic. So firstly, I'd like to go in a bit of background about who you are. So George has been with George Cross for a year now. However, he's had a huge career before he came to us. So he's coached a number of clubs: Riversdale, Old Melburnians, Old Zavarians, both in men's and women's sides. He's been at Richmond, being an assistant at an MPL one side. He's coached the under-20s at St Albans. He's been at Northcote City doing the same job. And more importantly, he spent a bunch of time at Football Victoria, hosting a range of roles there. The ones that really stand out to me: he's been a SAP coach, he's been a TIDC coach, and he's been a coaching developer. So not only that, what really impresses me is he spent a bit of time at Melbourne City being one of their academy coaches before joining George Cross. So I'm super pleased to have Jorge Gero join with us tonight. So thank you, George.
Thanks for the introduction, Sasha.
No problems. So I'm really excited about having this discussion with you today. And what I really want to understand, this is probably, we speak on a weekly basis, but tonight we're going to have a conversation that we probably haven't had before. And what I really want to focus on is some of your thinkings and your principles and the things that what make you who you are. So if that's okay, that's what I'd like to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, look, football for me started at a very young age. Seeing Maradona for the first time was where I got hooked into the game, and I guess began playing the game at a very young age after seeing Maradona in the '86 World Cup. So for me, that was the turning point, really, and from there on, I just wanted to be Maradona. But also, I guess the way he played the game is the way I sort of believe in football as well, in terms of, I like the creativity, the flair, the ability to take, players on 1v1. And, that sort of underpins a lot of, I guess, the way I like to watch the game. I like to coach the game, and also, I like players to play the game. So that sort of underpins a little bit of my idea, let's say, in terms of how we play.
Awesome. So it's that childhood inspiration that really governs still to this day where your mind's at about your ideas about your footballing philosophy. So maybe we can step a little bit further. What about your coaching philosophy? Talk to me about how that really then translates into your coaching philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I started a good 12 or so years ago now, I think, in the coaching game. And initially I started, with some junior teams, and, looking at my coaching now and where I sort of started back then, I think, I certainly do things a lot differently to what I used to back then. So I think in terms of my coaching philosophy, I've got an idea as to how I want my teams to play the game, but I think the way I coach is different depending on each group, really, that I work with. So for me, maybe initially when I first started out, I would coach based on solely what, my idea was and how I believed coaching should be. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think sort of the further I've gone with my coaching, it's more about, the group and the players. So I've got my principles in terms of how I like to play or how I like our teams to play. But in terms of how I coach it, it's certainly tailored around, specifically what the group's needs are. So, as an example, I worked with a group a few years back, and as I sort of progressed, maybe when I first started our coaching, I would have been quite vocal on the sidelines, but then as I progressed with my coaching, I sort of became less vocal, especially in the junior space. But then I had a group that were, spoke to me after a game and said, look, coach, we know that, your methodology is around letting players think for themselves and, not really giving them too many instructions on a match day in a junior perspective. But what we actually really need from you is to lift us up with your vocals, so that for me was a bit of a point to take on board, really. And I think from that, moment is I have an idea, but it sort of does flow a little bit around now in terms of what the players and the group need, really. So I sort of take the time to learn about the group and to ask the group and then sort of work out a structure that suits them.
That's interesting because you've done a lot of education, a sporting education. So you've completed a Bachelor of Sports Coaching at Victoria University, I think, and then you're also doing your Masters in Education in Sports Coaching at Sydney University. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
So
correct.
Okay. So how is your education formed in that framework? Is that form part of your ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of the education side of it, I've had the opportunity to delve a lot deeper into culture. And, values and visions and philosophies and how all that sort of fits in. And look, I think, you can always have an idea as to how you want to play the game, but there's so many other elements that need to be included in your vision and in your philosophy. And, culture is a part of it. So, one thing that we're trying to do at George Cross is, we emphasize, and I know it's a little bit, cliche at the moment because everyone talks about it, but it's, develop the person first. And for us, that's what we do look at. We look at developing the person first. But for us, it's important that, everyone that comes into the club feels part of a family. And I think the vision and the culture that we're trying to create at the club is, essentially I sort of see it as, this is the place where you come to learn to be the best version of yourself. The best version of yourself as a person, or the best version of yourself as a footballer, and anything else, that you can develop in the club. So that's essentially how I look at it. And I know, you and I have sort of touched on this before, Sasha, but I think in life, everyone's going on a journey to somewhere. Everyone's working towards something, whether the players are working towards their education or, coaches are working towards their careers, whether it's football or not. I think, the vision of the club that I have is what can we do to help people along their journey? And that's why I strongly emphasize the fact that, this is the place we want to create where people come to learn to be their best. So, as a technical director at the club myself, with the amount of teams and coaches that we have at the club, I try and put myself in and around, everyone as much as I can. And literally, rather than me sort of pushing ideas onto people and, okay, yeah, I do have my ideas and we'll talk about those openly with coaches, players and parents. I think, where I'm sort of best served is to walk around and just inject myself into everybody and just find out, what can I do to serve them really? As a coach, where might you want to go? What's your ambitions? You might be an under 10s coach at the moment, but your medium term vision is to go off and complete, one of your coaching licenses and then coach in, junior MPL. So for me, it's all about that. And it's the same for players as well, really. So, some come to the club and they're purely at the club because they want to just be involved around the club. They're there with their friends. Perfect. Let's create that great environment for them to be in, to satisfy their need in terms of why they're at the club. But on the other side, of course, you've got players that come in and have aspirations to, be the best they can and, reach the elite levels of the game. And that's where also, we like to provide the assistance and guidance really to get them onto their journey of where they're heading.
So you touched on a point that I want to sort of really delve deep into. So I know you're well on your path for your coaching and your licenses. You did your C license in 2014. You completed your B license in 2018. You're currently the vast majority of the way through your A license. So how has that formed in terms of you thinking as a framework to have your ideas of the philosophy of the game?
Yeah, look, I know when I first jumped onto the C license, I think my whole world just opened up really, in terms of the way I looked at football. And I know something that they talk about quite early on the C license is, when I think one of the first parts of it is you start to analyze a game and you think about, the moments of the game and looking at the game and, having not sort of looked at it in that particular way and then being, I guess, taught that way on the C license. I think that just opened up a different world for me and, and just allowed me to look at the game, more as a coach, I would say, as opposed to a spectator, really. So
I would definitely agree with that. You never watch the football the same way, right? So pre-C license and post-C license, you're trying to work out what the football problem is instead of just sitting there watching, trying to enjoy yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For me, it was, and looking at that and you think, I started playing and watching the game from, 8 or 9 years old. And then you get to, that point of doing that and you're like, wow, what have I been watching all these years, literally as a spectator. But I think it opens up a different world. And, and I think the other thing for me as well is just, the further through the licenses that you go, just how much detail is involved in, putting on a good quality session or program or whatever it may be. So, I think when you talk about the detail, you may go watch, a Real Madrid training session, for example, and they might be doing similar sort of activities to, what some of our kids are doing in under 12s or under 14s at the club. The activities from time to time tend to be similar, but it's the detail that's the difference that I think. It's the level of detail that they go into. So, again, that's something that I've learned over the journey, and something that I try to delve, much deeper in, and something that I try to, bring to the club as well, so that coaches can help develop their, football knowledge as well. Because the more and, learning never stops in football. I've always said to myself that, the moment that I feel that I know everything or there's nothing further to learn is probably the moment that I decide to, stop being involved in the game.
Yeah.
That would be sort of my marker really as to when I would sort of end my journey. But, there's always more to learn. And, just when you think you've grasped something new comes out. So you're always evolving. And detail is a big one, and that sort of, I think, distinguishes, the level of coaching really across, different coach experiences and coaching groups. So that's something that I'm really trying to do. And, as an example, you were involved in this, obviously, Sasha, as well, but we did a workshop on 1v1s a little while ago. So, traditionally, you may think of 1v1 as just 1v1 attacking or 1v1 defending, but, there's so many other elements to that. So 1v1 attacking, in what particular way? Is it attacking at speed? Is it attacking from a standing still position? So there's so much detail that we can delve into. It's endless. And that's something that we like to bring because it's the detail that allows us to develop the player fully, to get to the kind of levels that we want for them to be able to reach, senior football, if that's their aspiration, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what I'd like to sort of now zoom back out to work out, what are the values that you say? You've been at the club now for a year, and this is my second year at the club. What would you say that the values that we espouse as a club that makes us George Cross, what are they?
Yeah, look, from the day I walked into the club, the first thing I realised was the amount of passion that was at the club. And that's something that I've tried to work with from day one, because we do have so many passionate people, and all you need to do is look at, the volunteers and even coaches and parents, and everyone's really invested in the club. So passion is a big one that I think we should keep and obviously continue to nurture and grow, provided it's done in the right way, obviously. But also, I think there's an element there of humility and just being humble is something that I'm very big on as well, and something that we've tried to instill with the coaches and the team at the club. Just the way we sort of conduct ourselves in that manner, post games, whether we win or lose, I think is quite big. And
George, maybe if you can give an example of how we would like to exhibit humility. Let's say post-game.
Yeah, look, if you're talking post-game, I know a lot of coaches and players have a different idea here, but for me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of, the team song at the end of the match. For me, I think it's more about, recognizing the achievements of the opposition, the referees, obviously, or the officials, everybody that's been involved in the game. So the marshals, the parents, the coaches, going over and shaking hands and showing your respect, regardless of what the outcome of the game was. And then there's time, in the change rooms to celebrate your win. So, personally, when I coach my teams, I don't really do the song in the change rooms, to be honest. I
put my hand up. I do. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's fine. And that's fine. If it works for you and your team, then by all means.
Just to give other people an idea, the song in the change room, not on the pitch, on the sideline in front of it.
Yeah, look, I would think that would, come across as a little bit arrogant, to be honest, doing that on the pitch. I think there's a time and place for it. The other team, they're hurting. They've just lost. Sometimes when you see a team get smashed, 15-0, and it happens, and then the other team singing their theme song post-match on the pitch. I don't know. That for me leaves a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, to be honest. So
a 15-0 result really wasn't a match to begin with, right? So when it goes to that level, So and what else? So you said passion, humility
for me. Yeah, look, emotional stability, I think, is a big one. I think, especially when you're dealing with kids, and let's talk about players first. So kids, a lot of them very young, they're going through growth spurts, through puberty, through all the rest of it. They've got 1,000,001 things going on in their lives. It's not uncommon for them to react, quite, indifferently to certain situations, whether it's at training or match day. So I think, as a club, we've really tried to focus on emotional stability, trying to talk, our players through certain emotions that they're feeling, and, how they may have reacted based off that emotion, and, how they may face that same situation in the future. And again, with coaches as well, I know what it's like to be on the sidelines. I've been there, many times before. Again, a reflection of your team is, sometimes the way the coach controls their emotions. The coach is such a powerful leader of the team that, the team reflects the coach. So, if we're all ranting and raving on the sidelines, and don't have our emotions in check, well, then, you can be pretty sure that, your players will essentially exhibit the same sort of behaviors. So, it is about just having that emotional stability. So I think that's a big one as well for me. Another big one is, I guess, hard work. Nothing should be given to anyone on a plate. You have to earn it, especially in a sporting environment. And especially if you have aspirations to go all the way, you know. So the higher the levels you reach, the harder you've got to actually fight for your position. So, you know, if you do get your first team opportunity later down the track, you know, when you go up and you're in that first training session, you know, don't think that the senior guys are going to be all rosy to you, because all of a sudden, you know, they're thinking, well, hold on a second, this kid that's come up is now going to start fighting for my spot. So, you know, at no stage should you think you've ever made it per se.
Yeah.
You should always continue to work hard, regardless of the level that you're at. And, you know, you look at guys like, you know, Ronaldo, for example, who, you know, how old is Ronaldo now? 34, 35. Yet, you know, he still trains like, you know, that week's training, you know, his life depends on it, whether he's going to be selected for that game or not. So, you know, at 35, it's easy. And with what he's achieved, it's easy to go into a, you know, a holding pattern and just go through the motions and whatnot. But, you know, that's why these guys are the greatest that they are. So, yeah, look, hard work. And I think the other one for me is intelligence as well, really. You know, we certainly look at...
What do you mean by that?
Intelligence, I think, when we're talking about, you know, from the football perspective, you know, I think there's the physical attributes where, you know, we can just create, you know, fast, strong players that just bump people off the ball or beat people with their pace. But I think a big one for us is intelligence. So let's educate our players in regards to certain movements or, you know, certain positioning. And that sort of goes back to what I touched on before about, you know, the detail that we spoke about. So it's that football intelligence that not only, you know, comes through from what we sort of talk about in the coaching space, but then that sort of filters down to the players as well. So it's about creating, you know, intelligent coaches, intelligent players, also to, you know, provide that information and education to the parents and the members of the club as well. So they all know, you know, what we're trying to do, because, you know, I do know, I have had a number of conversations with parents at George Cross, obviously, and, you know, many other clubs that I've been involved with in terms of, you know, the way we go about our football development, which is all sort of football based and game sensed based. And you look at, you know, a lot of parents like to see kids do sprints and all that sort of stuff. Now, look, I'm not saying there's no place for that. There certainly is. And there's certainly a time to do all the physical stuff. But, you know, I think it's crucial that we create the football intelligence first and the football smarts first, and develop, you know, that really, 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 really good skill base, or the foundation base. And then once we've nailed that, then I think we can then start moving into, you know, the more physical training, the more physical attributes. So, you know, especially, you know, when we talk about SAP, which is something that you touched on before, which I've, you know, been involved in, you know, from the ages of 9 to 13 or 9 to 12, it's crucial that we, you know, develop the foundations for skill-based foundation. So, you know, at that particular age, there's no point in getting kids to jump over hurdles and all that sort of stuff for the whole session. Yeah, look, you might want to introduce some of that for the first 5 minutes of the session and so forth, no problem. But the main bulk of the session should be about, you know, developing the skill base, educating the players, you know, how to receive the ball, you know, if you take a first touch into that space in this scenario, what does that actually mean? And, you know, what's your next action going to be after that? So it's creating that football intelligence around that. So that's a big thing that I believe in. And I think we should focus as much time as possible in those age groups between that 9 to 12. You know, and the fact that we only get to train, you know, 2 times a week or 3 times a week in our environments, you know, every single minute should be spent on that. So, yeah, that's a few of the ideas.
It's interesting that you talked about all of those values, and so many parents bring their children to George Cross because of the quality of the teams. But you haven't mentioned winning as part of one of our, like, core values that sort of govern us. And I, from the outside, before I came to George Cross, I always saw George Cross as having, quality sides that did well, that won, some of their leagues, right? So how does that play into, because I know that the parents, from our better sides, they're quality sides. They can play, right? They might be in some of the year levels in the top 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the state, right? But so how do you equate that?
Great question, because it always comes up. But yeah, look, I'm not averse to winning. Everyone wants to win. You play sport to win. So, but look, I just feel that it's not the be all and end all. Okay. So, for me, the focus is on the stuff that we just spoke about. And literally, I think if we get those things right, so, creating those emotionally stable players, those, players with good technique and the skill acquisition attributes, then I think if we're doing a good job in that space, the result probably takes care of itself later down the track. So, look, do I really worry if we win an under 12s game or an under 15s game? Definitely not. Winning's a part of it. And if we can win, great, let's win. Losing's a part of it. Learn to, handle that and take the lessons from that. And also drawing's a part of it too. So, all of those elements players need to experience really. And I think one thing that someone once told me, or I heard somewhere from a coach, a high level coach, which I thought was really amazing, was that when you win, you're not actually as good as you think you are. But when you lose, you're probably not as bad as you think you were. So, and the lesson for me in that really is that, and I know I used to do this in the past where if I would coach and win a game, I would analyze it, but there was no way I was spending as much time analyzing a winning game as opposed to analyzing a game that I would lose,
How true is that?
However, there is probably a lot you can see from the games that you just won that you can improve on as compared to the games that you lost. So, there's a lot of lessons in both sides, really.
Yeah. It's interesting, but so it just goes to the mindset. So when people are thinking, a parent might want to watch this video, and whether the coaches are, not angry or angry about a particular result, where our mindset comes from, right? Our ethos is about player development. It's about controlling the inputs. And if we do all those things right, then the outputs will happen, right? So,
absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So maybe you can, so this is the first time you've become a technical director. Every other time you've had control of the team or been an assistant to a team, and literally you controlled the domain. So what's it like coaching coaches?
Yeah, look, I've really enjoyed it. I like to always think of myself as someone that likes to help. And I think, as a technical director, that probably is what the role is about, really. Yes, okay, we can talk about all the technical side and everything that we've just spoken about. But I think ultimately it's a people business. So at the end of the day, for me, working with coaches, I think I've really enjoyed it. And I think the way I sort of go about it is, we have a club framework that, we've put in place and we're continuing to evolve. But ultimately, I don't want to take away a coach's individualism, because I think, everyone's different. Everyone coaches differently. Everyone, believes in the game differently. So for me, the way I've sort of set it out is, we have a philosophy, and we'll be doing a bit more work on that soon as well, because it was halted obviously with COVID coming in, but we'll have a set of guiding principles that we want to work with. But within those principles, there's an opportunity and an element for coaches to, you know, put their own little twist on it with what they think is good for them and their teams really, and their players. So, look, the coaches at the club for me have all been really, really open and welcoming and warm and, you know, willing to learn, and they've showed that enthusiasm to learn and that hunger to learn and obviously develop. So working with everyone has been great. And obviously we've had some coaches that have been at the club for a while and some new coaches that have come in. And yeah, look, across the board, I think it's been very, very positive. And, you know, I think, you know, we've got 30 plus teams, you know, at the club. There's coaches that are of, you know, varying experiences and varying levels. So for me, really, we're working with everyone to try and continue to progress as a coaching group, as am I, you know, as a technical director. I don't know everything and I don't profess to know everything, but I'm continuing to develop myself. And yeah, across the board, I think there's been a good, I guess, engagement level from the coaches and a good hunger really to develop. So everyone's been great. And we're looking at, you know, taking that, you know, to the next level. And I know initially when I did come in, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but, you know, we had a percentage of coaches that, you know, had not done any qualifications at all. And so that was something that I've really sort of put a focus on, to at least have every single one of our coaches at the club at least have obtained some sort of a qualification. We're still working through that process. I think we're, you know, probably, I would say around 80% of the coaches at the club, you know, have completed a coaching qualification, and the ones that haven't, they've shown an interest to do something soon as well. So with everyone, I've worked quite closely with them. We've provided them, you know, some guidance, and that's what we're looking at doing moving forward, just to continue to, you know, advance our skill base really.
So I would echo that point. I mean, having been at another club for a long time, I think the overall coaching standard is very good. So I'd be interested to hear. I mean, you've been at the clubs where all the coaching is elite. Okay, so at the likes of a Melbourne City, every single coach from the ground up, okay, is decent, right? I would say quality, having experienced it firsthand. So how would you compare, let's say, for example, how are we going on our journey in comparison to, let's say, an elite club like a Melbourne City, for instance?
Yeah, look, really well. I mean, I guess the differences being that, you know, at Melbourne City, the people that coach there, they do it for a living, ultimately, so they can invest more time in it. And, you know, that's what it takes really. It does take investing more time into coaching because, you know, as we sort of spoke about before, it's all about the detail, you know, and going into that detail. So, but for me at George Cross, I think it's very, very positive, because even though our coaches at the club, you know, don't do this for a living, you know, they've all got their own jobs and careers and everything else they do, you know, during the day, yet I still see the amount of time all our coaches invest in this in their own time. You know, it's phenomenal. So for me, the fact that there is that motivation and there is that interest there, you know, we're on the right path. For me, I guess it's more about, you know, maybe helping them or guiding them to look down certain rabbit holes a little bit further. And I think that will probably accelerate that process, that learning process a little bit quicker. But yeah, we're on the right path. We're certainly on the right path. And I think, you know, we started to do it, but COVID sort of got in the way. But we started to have a little bit of a crossover where, you know, some coaches were working with other coaches and learning from each other. And that is something that I'm sort of quite big on. You know, I know there was crossover from, as an example, you know, some of the NPL coaches going over to community and some of the community going over to NPL, and working with each other in that space. And it's good, you know, for coaches to see different environments and see different groups, see how different coaches work.
Yeah.
There's been other instances, in our girls program as well, where those coaches have worked together and, have gone to each other's sessions and learned from each other. And, as an example, we've got an under 15, 16 girls group, and we've got a senior women's group. So, the under 15, 16 girls coaches have gone and observed what happens in the senior women, because obviously they're responsible for transitioning those players that they've got into that senior group next. So, we're on the right path. I'm very, very confident that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it is about commitment and endeavor and putting that time in. And I know it's hard. I've been there before where, I'm working full-time, not in football, outside of football. And then you got to go home and put on sessions and design sessions and analyze games and, all the man management stuff as well, where you talk to players, coaches, parents. Sometimes we forget, how demanding coaching is. And, it's not as simple as, you're taking 2-3 sessions a week and then a game on the weekend. There's so much more to it. And for me, the positive is that everybody at the club in a coaching capacity is putting above and beyond what I would expect. So we're on the right path.
Oh, excellent. So maybe we can talk like we're many months into lockdown, right? So if somebody's looking back at this in months or years from now, what are some of the things that our coaches are doing with their teams during this lockdown period? Maybe you can share to the people that from watching from outside. What are we doing?
Yeah, look, we've run a few things. So we've run some workshops. So I think, look, lockdown, especially in Victoria, lockdown 1.0, I think is a completely different beast to lockdown 2.0. I think with the first lockdown being a very unknown territory, I think there was still, a lot of motivation from everyone across the board in terms of continuing to, train, whether it was online via Zoom. But I think, as it progressed to lockdown 2.0, I think a lot of people have been a bit flat and deflated. So for us, first lockdown was all about running workshops with a few workshops with coaches, a few workshops with our players. We did a workshop on growth versus fixed mindsets as an example. That workshop was run firstly with the coaches, and then the coaches ran that workshop with their players. Obviously, age dependent. You might not be doing it to that level for running a workshop of that kind for an under sevens group, for example. But the coaches adapted to the idea and put something on that was more tailored to that level. We also ran sort of workshops on, coaching expertise and what that means based on, journal research. We've workshops with the players. A lot of the coaches were running sessions with the players. I know like yourself, Sasha, you ran, quite a few sessions with your players, whether that was, ball mastery or from a sort of physical conditioning perspective as well. So that was sort of what we went with in the first lockdown. Look, second lockdown, I'm not going to lie, I felt pretty flat when the second lockdown came in. I think, having, gone back to the club after the first lockdown and, getting everyone back on the park for 5-6 weeks and then, them being told that we're back in lockdown again, I think was very hard to take. So look, this time for us, it's more about the mental health, really. So the emphasis from my end onto the coaches and then onto the players and parents further down is just really more about reaching out and just making sure everyone's okay, really. Whether that's on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis, I think that's been the emphasis. And I know, there's different groups that, coaches have worked with that have expressed, that they want to do some ball mastery sessions or whatever it may be. They've done that as well. So I've sort of given, the coaches the freedom to work with what they think is best with their groups. But ultimately, the main priority is really everyone's physical and mental health.
so important. I think it circles back to the first point where you talked about, like, we want to make sure that every person that comes to the club becomes a good person. So first we want to care for the person and then develop them as a footballer, right? So it goes to the point that example that you raised. So thank you for discussing that. So talk to me about what's next. What do you have on the horizon? What are our future plans? What are the things that people should get excited about in that are already at George Cross that you want to implement?
Yeah, look, I would have liked to say that we're 1 year into our plan, but given the disruption that we've got, we're probably 6 months into our plan, and we've had a bit of a pause. But look, I think, we've sort of touched on a few of the things already, but I think it's really just developing our program.
Yep. So what does that mean?
For me,
when you say
absolutely.
Develop,
so
let's tell the people what is it that we want to do?
Absolutely. So the strength of our program is going to be underpinned by ultimately our coaching and the football intelligence that we spoke about and the detail that we sort of spoke about before. So ultimately, from when I stepped into the club, I noticed that, and you were involved in the club, Sasha, you could probably give me a bit more, give an input on this. But ultimately, I realized pretty quickly that there was no, one direction that we were all pulling towards. I think coaches were probably left, to their own devices, really, to, just work with their team and develop their team. And that's no disrespect to whoever was, leading the technical side of things beforehand. But, I think there was a little bit of a gap there, and we just needed to find a way that we were progressing all together. So in terms of our program, I firstly started when I came into the club by sitting down with the senior coaching staff and the senior group and getting a real understanding of, what they're trying to do in terms of their football, which then allowed me to break down our program and how we should develop players and coach players and to be ready to play senior football. So there was elements that I took from, the senior coaching staff and what they're looking for in terms of how we design a program. There was also elements of what I've experienced before, having worked at, Melbourne City and at FFE in the state team programs, and I've plugged in those elements into our program as well. So ultimately, the program is a long-term development program that, we're looking at kids coming in, if we're talking about from scratch, we're looking at kids coming in to our Little Legends program, starting to, I guess, understand.
Those kids
unbelievable.
Are so cute. So unbelievable. How old if you could tell what our Little Legends program is? Yeah,
look, our Little Legends is the program that we have that it's an introductory program. So it allows kids to start getting involved in the game and start building their confidence in the game without having to concern themselves about, playing a competitive game on the weekend. So essentially it's a once a week program, which we run on a Saturday morning. And yeah, you're not wrong. They're very cute. So it's, it's a 3 to 6 year old program, but we've had
3 to 6.
We actually had, they're unbelievable. Very, very cute. We've got, I think we've got a couple of kids in there that actually fell at the sort of 2.5 age bracket.
Okay.
But, they love it. They love being involved. They're not out of place, even though, some of the other kids are, a couple of months older than them. But look, that's the starting point. We're bringing them in. We start getting them integrated into our club. So they start to, work with our, as we said, developing the person, our culture, all the rest of it. And then from there, we transition them into our under sevens program, which is the first age group level where competitive games start. And then we start, and we've got, I guess, a program or different things that we're working on in each of those age groups that develop players for the longer term. So starting point is little legends. They come in, they integrate, and then through each of the age groups, there's a certain principles that we follow for those age groups that help develop players for the long term. So I guess in terms of what people should be excited about, look, you know, as far as I can see, for me, I think by really developing our coaches and our people, I think the program that we have is going to accelerate. I think also the fact that, you know, we already have good players at the club, and we already have, you know, teams that are very competitive. I think we're probably still nowhere near where we can be with those teams.
Yeah.
And that for me is the exciting part, really, is that we're putting in all these little elements and the foundations. And I think, you know, where we can go in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, the sky's the limit, really. And I think, you know, if we use NPL as an example, because they were the ones that played competitive matches, or the only ones that sort of got to play some league matches this year. But, you know, we're talking about a brand new NPL program. Obviously, the club wasn't in the NPL the year before, and we started from scratch. So the 13s, 14s, 15s, and 16s, you know, we're coming up week in, week out against established programs, you know, clubs that have had NPL programs for X amount of years. And we were competitive. You know, you look at our under 13s and where they are from a development point of view, you know, they weren't out of place in the NPL. And to see them at that level and to know that we're only just started to implement a program in the last, you know, 6 to 12 months, knowing where they may be able to go in the future is very, very exciting. And it's the same for, you know, our 14s, 15s and 16s in the NPL as well, who, you know, at times found it tough, but at times were very competitive, you know. So I guess it's, in terms of excitement, is that we do have a program in place now.
Yeah.
It's ever evolving. We're going to do some more work on it because it obviously got halted with the break and the pause with lockdown. But I'm very, very optimistic as to where our players and team can be in the long term. And with any program, it takes time and patience.
Yep.
So, you know, we need our members, our players, our parents to stick with us. You know, your team or your players may be struggling a little bit, you know, in the early phase, but we strongly believe in the program. And if you stick with it, you'll see the benefits in years to come.
That's interesting. So you mentioned, so we touched on a little bit about the Little Legends program. You bring your child to 3 to 6, and more or less, they've got a framework to play football at one club, all the way if they're good enough, all the way to senior football, or men's or women's. Talk to us, because we had trials at the start of the year, and obviously most clubs have trials where there was a selection process, but there's been a decision at the club about how we will proceed in the subsequent following years. Talk to us about what that looks like. What will next year's trials look like?
Yeah, really good question. Look, I started the job, I think it was 1 week prior to trials commencing at the club. So I think the trial dates had already been set. The expressions of interest had already been, you know, completed. So I guess that was my first experience of trials at George Cross. And look, I've been involved in trials at other clubs, obviously, before as well. And look, for me, I don't think trials is a true reflection of, you know, a player's ability. You know, if you're talking about as a trial, for example, you know, you have 50 players turn up to your trial and you've got 4 sessions to look at all 50 players. I mean, I think, you know, there's a real issue there that you're going to miss something.
Yes.
Because ultimately, you know, with 4 sessions and each session, you know, maybe only going for 75 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it may be, you know, 4 sessions, 50 plays, you're probably only looking at each player for 30 seconds to a minute, really. And you're making an analysis based on that, you know. So, it's personally, I don't think it's fair, but I think the big one for me is I don't think it's a a proper reflection on someone's ability.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't know what that player may have gone through that day or that week, or, you know, they could be a bit flat, they could be a bit ill. So, you know, I think talent identification overall in this country is certainly space that needs a lot of work or a different, you know, way of thinking. So as a club, what we've decided to do, and I was pretty strong on this, is, you know, we're sort of going to work more towards a retention policy, and that's not just players but coaches as well. You know, the idea is to try and work with people to develop them. So ideally, we want to move away from a trial process.
Yeah.
And what we'll do essentially is, you know, something that I sort of put in place is a monitoring system that the coaches have to monitor their players.
Yeah.
And then the coaches will run essentially a parent-teacher type process twice a year. So one at, you know, the halfway point of the season and one at the end of the season. So at least at the halfway point, you know, players and parents have an idea as to, you know, what you may need to work on, you know, what your strengths are and so forth. And then at the end of the season, you come back to that particular player and the parents, and you again give them a progress report, how they tracked for the season. And, you know, then and there, if, you know, they're tracking well and they're happy, we just turn them over for next season as well, or roll them over rather for next season, and keep them at the club. So, you know, there's going to be instances where, you know, maybe a couple of players don't work out for whatever reason. You know, they haven't progressed, or, you know, it could be that they've lost interest, or exactly, not happy. So look, our idea really is that, you know, we try and keep as many of the players as possible. Now, I know, you know, that wasn't in place when I started, as I said, because, you know, I came into the role with, you know, a week lead up time to trials and didn't really know any of the players. So, but look, that's where we want to take it. And
no trials. So no trials.
No trials. I know everyone will be happy with no trials. But essentially what we'll do is, we'll still keep the doors open for new people to come to the club. But the idea would still be there that, you know, we run an expression of interest and we invite them in to train with our groups. So that would be the idea.
So more like an invitation process. So people say, I want to join your club. You say, okay, where have you played? You played at a neighbouring club, or you've moved into the area. Come and have a look-see, have a week or two to see how you fit in, and then we'll make that assessment. But it'll be a much more selective process rather than open the floodgates of, you know, 40 to 70 kids on a particular session, and then we're trying to work out who can play.
Exactly. I think we need to introduce new players to the club on a smaller scale. So that we're able to really assess them better as well. You know, rather than having to look at 50 players, if you're inviting, you know, 3 or 4 into your session, into your sessions, you get a really good look at those players, you know, and you don't need to worry about the group, your core group that you've already selected for next season. And you can just look at, you know, the other new boys or girls that are coming into your program. So look, that's the idea. You know, that's what we're trying to implement. That's what we will implement. You know, again, not really knowing what's going to happen when we come out of lockdown, and you know, we'll review it. But ultimately, that's where we want to go.
That's our mindset. That's good to know.
Absolutely. And I think it's, you know, retention. I know as a fact, you know, look at Melbourne Victory, for example. You know, I know they've implemented a policy there with their academy, is that if you come into their academy and selected for their academy, that they promise you that you get a minimum of 2 seasons, you know, in their academy, because that gives them enough time to work with you for a couple of years. So, you know, same sort of thing with us, really. So we bring players in, we retain, we work with them for the longer term, because ultimately, you know, we do want to work with them for the longer term because we have a long-term program. So there's no point in jumping from club to club. It's stay with us, develop. And that's why, you know, you look at, there's a lot of research done on that player development aspect in terms of players staying at the one club.
Yep.
Look at Messi, for example. You know, he may not have been the player that he is or become the player that he has become if he had chopped and changed and moved to different clubs. But he stayed with the one club, developed through their long-term process, their long-term program, and got to where he is now.
So if I look back at the club that I was previously involved in and where we had success, the years that we did really well, the vast majority of the team played within the junior ranks and they moved up as a group, right? So we've got another coach in one of the other age groups who played at that club, right? And he can attest that about 6 or 7 of the lads were played in a similar year. And when they would play senior football, and that was at a high levels, so either State 1 or the old VPL, they really played for the jersey. It wasn't about, coming in and going out one year where you rotate your whole squad. But the core group of players had played for the same club for years and a decade, all the way from juniors to the seniors. So they would call themselves that club. And they bled for the jersey. And I think that something happens to a fan when they see a player. They've seen this kid grow up from 12 and 13 and watch them play, and then make their senior debut and then play seniors. Right, they become your boy. You know what I mean? Like there's this affinity to the player who's played all the way from the juniors. And I see a lot of the I've only been at the club for 2 years, but I see a couple of players that have gone from the 16s playing the resis and even get a look in on the bench for and train with the seniors. And you start to say, okay, that player, he's got something special, right? He might play at the level, but I don't know, from a coach of the club, you look at that player as a little bit more affinity, right? It's because they've been with the club for so long and you just wish them well, right? As opposed to a player that's come in for, just that season. I'd like to treat all of them the same, but,
I think, I certainly think there's, so much joy and pleasure in watching a kid that's been at the club over a number of years then make his senior debut. So, I think that is no doubt a proud moment for any club, to say that you've had someone at the club for so long and you've given them a path to then go into the senior side of things is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Look, I'm looking at some of the teams in Europe now and I'm seeing, with the way money is at the moment and how tight it is, that a lot of them have, started to put an emphasis on the academy. And, even look at someone like a Chelsea, for example, who was banned from the transfer window and they've had to, this past season, just introduce academy players. And, the fact that they had a number of academy players come through was just amazing, really. And I think, for one, it goes to show, the work that the clubs do leading up to that, into the academy. And look, it's a proud moment. And, there's certainly, I think, something in it in terms of continuity.
Yeah.
Again, I'll sort of touch on the NPL space because we had some games, as I said, before lockdown came in. But, in the under 14s, for example, we came up against North Geelong. And North Geelong, that particular team is phenomenal. Now, beauty about that team is that core team has been together since under 7s, under 8s, and they're as good as they are because of their continuity, really, and their retention. So they've stuck together, they've stayed together, they've continued on this long-term path, and they're as good as they are because of that, And again, you look at NPL, we had Melbourne Knights, the under 16 team in that age group. And as far as I understand, I don't know too much of the history, but I think that team's been together for a number of years. But from what I've heard is they haven't lost a game for the last 2-3 seasons or whatever it may be. So, there's definitely something in continuity and something in staying with your team or a club for a long time.
Yeah.
The start of that process or the start of that journey is always a bumpy road, but if you stick together, I think there's so much success that can happen. So, our emphasis really is to retain, try and keep everyone together, and try and have, as many proud moments as possible with players, in the longer term future getting into our senior squad at the club.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we speak on a weekly basis, but I've really enjoyed our conversation today because it's gone into how we think about what we think about, right? People see the actions, the sessions on our training methods, our session plans, what happens on the park, but they don't really get a chance to talk about, what drives us from the inside. And so today's been a really special chat. So I really appreciate you taking the time to air out your thoughts, and so that it's recorded, so anyone who's going to watch this video can really jump into our space of what happens with us as coaches. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this chat with you, and thank you for all the work you do around the club as well. So I think it's underestimated, as I said earlier, the amount of time and effort people put into things. And, guys like yourself, they put your hand up for a number of things and do all the little extra bits and pieces such as this. It's the culture that we talk about, and people like yourself are the lifeblood of the club. So thank you for that.
I don't think it's about me. It's like plenty of people at George Cross, and one of the reasons why, so I'm not Maltese, but I married a Maltese girl, so I feel like I've got an affinity to George Cross. But there's so many people, and I think that's really what it is. And I think it's testament to why we have so many teams, right? And we are spoiled. If coming from a club only a few kilometres down the road, what we have at George Cross, we are spoilt as a club. Really, really, really spoilt. If you look at our framework, our coaching philosophy, our facilities, our committee, the amount of effort the committee puts in onto to ensuring that we all can enjoy our game, our spectators, our families. It's really a joyful place, right? And it's a reason why it doesn't surprise me why this 50 or 70 kids want to come to a trial date, right? People want to become involved. And I suppose this session tonight gives people that deeper thinking about what they might expect if they were to, be involved. So, but yeah, I think we're really blessed. And so I'm excited about, once this time period being out back on the park, and allowing our kids to have a bit of a go. So, so here's to until we get back on the park.
Absolutely. It's a great environment to be in. And, a lot of people spend so much time at the club. It's almost, your second place away from home. It's a happy, joyous environment. A lot of people do a lot of great work, a lot of volunteers. And, we hope to get back out there sooner rather than later. I know I've certainly missed it. Awesome.
Well, thank you once again. And until next time. So we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Sasha.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.